space-based solar lasers powering AI server farms, autonomous bots that literally cannot stop ordering candles, and the measurable, terrifying reality of the dead internet. Welcome to Enuku.com, AI news you can use. Let's get right into it. Right now, literally 300 miles above your head, give or take, there might be a satellite preparing to beam a concentrated, near-infrared laser of solar energy straight down to Earth, which is just wild to visualize. And its target isn't some secret military base or a city grid. Its target is a server farm, just sitting in the middle of nowhere, working 24/7 to train an artificial intelligence. I know it honestly sounds completely like science fiction, but this is actually the literal operational reality of the tech ecosystem right now. We are rapidly moving from building basic software tools to completely reconstructing global architecture. Today is Monday, April 27, 2026, and the overarching theme of the day is incredibly clear. We have officially entered the era of the AI rewire. The technology has entirely graduated from those novelty chatbots we were all playing with a few years ago. It is actively reconstructing global infrastructure, our economies, and even the laws of governance itself. And the speed of this transition is genuinely difficult to process. The foundational layers of how business, science, and the internet function are being swapped out in real time. To really understand why AI is changing everything, we have to start at the physical layer. You have to follow the money and the metal. The staggering amounts of money and hardware required to build this tech are completely upending the industry. Take OpenAI and Microsoft. They just fundamentally restructured their historic partnership. It is a massive uncoupling. Microsoft is ending its exclusivity deal with OpenAI. They are keeping the licensing rights to OpenAI's intellectual property until 2032, and they do remain a major shareholder, obviously, but that strict exclusivity is gone. So OpenAI is now free to court Amazon and Google. They can basically offer their models across rival cloud platforms. Why would Microsoft give up that exclusive lock? It really just comes down to the sheer cost of the hardware. The cloud wars, as we used to call them, have evolved into the compute wars. Cloud providers are using massive, unprecedented capital investments to basically lock in advanced AI models. Google just committed $10 billion to the AI company Anthropic, and that follows a $33 billion commitment from Amazon, which actually values Anthropic at an astronomical $350 billion. But the mechanism of these deals is what is really fascinating here. Google and Amazon aren't just handing over blank checks. They are giving Anthropic what amounts to massive gift cards that can only be spent on their own servers. In return for the investment, Anthropic is committing to spend over $100 billion on Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud infrastructure over the next decade. $100 billion. Let's just ground that scale for a second. That is roughly the GDP of a mid-sized country, easily, and it is committed solely to renting computer servers. It really tells you that hardware, specifically memory and processing power, is the absolute bottleneck right now. To train these massive models, you need an absolute ocean of memory, and the supply chain for that is incredibly concentrated. That is exactly why a memory chip supplier like SK Hynix just hit record high stocks, completely beating out Samsung. Asia-based memory suppliers essentially hold the keys to the global AI hardware production line. But companies are finding wild ways to hack around these hardware limits. The Chinese AI lab DeepSeek just launched version 4 of their model. Because of US export bans, they obviously can't get the top-tier NVIDIA chips, so they ran it on Chinese Huawei Ascend chips instead. This is a huge deal. Bypassing NVIDIA is incredibly difficult because it isn't just about swapping out a physical piece of silicon. NVIDIA has a software ecosystem called CUDA that most AI developers are entirely locked into. So DeepSeek breaking out of that ecosystem and running efficiently on Huawei chips proves there is a viable AI infrastructure outside of the Western stack.
And the economics of it are deeply disruptive too. DeepSeek v4 offers a 1 million token context window. Just for context, if you aren't familiar, tokens are the basic chunks of data an AI reads, and 1 million tokens in a context window means you could feed it something like 2 long novels all at once. And they are charging just $1.74 per million input tokens. That is an absolute price war. The Western frontier models like GPT 5.5 or Claude Opus charge around $5 for the same output. It is a massive undercut. But let's go back to that space laser, because the hardware isn't just silicon chips. It is electricity. It takes so much power, and the terrestrial power grid is maxed out. So Meta just signed a deal with a company called Overview Energy for 1 gigawatt of space-based solar power. They are completely bypassing the terrestrial US power grid. The issue isn't even just generating the electricity. It's the backlog. There's something like a 5-year backlog for permits and local zoning laws just to connect a massive data center to a county grid, which tech companies obviously hate. So Meta is bypassing that bureaucracy entirely. They are beaming near-infrared light from orbit down to terrestrial solar plants, so their data centers can run 24/7. No weather delays, no need for massive battery farms, just constant orbital sunshine. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, Meta just cut 8,000 jobs, about 10% of their workforce, specifically to fund this $72 billion AI capital expenditure build-out. Aren't they basically hollowing out their actual company to build a machine? Is the cure killing the patient here? Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the tech industry just no longer views human headcount as the engine of growth. The semiconductor ecosystem and the energy grid are now strategically more important than the software itself. These hyperscalers are behaving like nation-states fighting over natural resources, building infrastructure empires. Because the models they are building are no longer just answering trivia questions, they are doing the actual work. This is the core transition. We are officially moving from the chatbot era into the autonomous agent economy. A chatbot waits for your prompt. An agent takes a high-level goal, breaks it down into subtasks, and executes them independently over hours or even days. You see this in the coding world right now. Google revealed that 75% of its new code is AI-generated. That is staggering. And Microsoft is at 20 to 30%, but they're aiming for 95% in 5 years. And it's not just code either. OpenAI's new model, GPT 5.5, which is hilariously codenamed Spud, acts as a chief of staff for multi-step projects. Because it was trained natively on new NVIDIA chips, the computing costs dropped by 35 times. But it's still so resource-intensive that Google had to roll out a credit-based system for Gemini just to manage the heavy workloads. This brings us to an incredible story about an energy analyst named Jeremy. Jeremy is a single analyst who spent $6,000 on personal cloud tokens over 3 weeks. That is a massive personal AWS bill. But working entirely alone, he used AI agents to independently rebuild a complex data product. The incumbent company in his industry took a 100-person team a full decade to build the exact same thing. Jeremy didn't get replaced by AI. He basically became a one-man enterprise. When one person can direct a swarm of AI agents to do the work of 100 people, the traditional corporate org chart completely collapses. Middle management is just obsolete in that model.
And these agents are entering the financial realm too, buying and selling on their own. Anthropic ran an internal test called Project Deal. They gave 69 employees a $100 budget each, and they handed the actual buying and selling negotiations on a Slack channel entirely over to Claude agents. The results are crazy. The bots successfully negotiated 186 deals worth over $4,000. The more advanced Claude Opus agents actually squeezed out an average of $3.64 more per deal than the smaller Haiku versions. It's so wildly specific, and the humans monitoring the deals didn't even notice the aggressive tactics. They were just happy the bot handled the friction of the transaction. Anthropic is leaning hard into this by giving enterprise agents a memory feature so they retain knowledge across sessions. It sounds terrifyingly efficient, but we do need a reality check here because it is not all perfectly optimized bot commerce just yet. We have to talk about Luna. Andon Labs let an agent named Luna run a real boutique in San Francisco. Her goal was to optimize inventory and make a profit. Instead, she lost $13,000. She couldn't comprehend the nuances of human employee schedules, and she literally could not stop ordering candles. Just endless candles. The physical logistics completely confused her, so her fallback was just to buy more candles. Digital agents still hit massive friction when they interact with physical logistics. But the thing is, the technology is actively designing solutions for its own flaws. Take ASI Evolve, for example. ASI Evolve is a framework built around recursive self-improvement, which is basically the holy grail of AI development. It is a system that automates the entire AI development lifecycle. So instead of a human engineer writing an algorithm, the AI runs millions of simulated tests overnight. It finds these micro-efficiencies a human couldn't possibly see, and then it rewrites its own code to be smarter. It autonomously discovered a language model architecture that actually outperformed human design baselines by 18 points. Here is where it gets really interesting. If the machine is rewriting itself to be smarter, and we are letting these bots loose in the economy, it's kind of like high-frequency stock trading, but for everyday life. If two bots sign a contract, or if Luna goes bankrupt buying thousands of candles for a boutique, who actually pays the credit card bill? We are currently in a total legal vacuum. Current contract laws are entirely unequipped to handle liability when two autonomous algorithms agree to a deal. If an AI hallucinates a contract term and the human owner disputes it, there is just no legal precedent for who holds the liability. And that legal vacuum matters deeply because these agents are escaping the digital realm and flooding the physical world. OpenAI is quietly partnering with legendary designer Jony Ive, along with Qualcomm and Luxshare, to build a native AI smartphone by 2028. The goal is to eliminate the concept of apps entirely and create a device where the AI is the operating system itself. Google DeepMind just opened an AI campus in South Korea, partnering directly with the government for scientific breakthroughs. You also have industrial giants like NSK partnering with Accenture to completely reinvent the physical factory floor using AI management. Then there's BioOil, a startup that raised $70 million to resurrect abandoned pharmaceutical drugs. They use large language models to read through decades of failed clinical trial data, finding molecular patterns that human researchers missed. And they already have 2 resurrected drugs in advanced trials. But my absolute favorite physical world impact has to be the island of Anguilla. Anguilla controls the .I web domain extension because every single tech startup wants an AI web address right now. Registration skyrocketed from 60,000 to over 3 million. This tiny island is now funding nearly half of its national budget, literally building a new airport and funding public health care, entirely from selling domain names to tech bros. While the physical world is building airports, the digital world is turning into a ghost town. We have to look at the dead internet phenomenon. A joint study by Stanford and Imperial College London found that 33% of all new websites created since 2022 are primarily AI generated, 1/3 of the new internet. The study reveals a severe homogenization of the web. AI generated content is displacing human written blogs and articles, creating this massive echo chamber with decreasing linguistic diversity. It is all starting to sound exactly the same. The dead internet theory, the idea that the web is mostly bots talking to bots, is no longer a fringe conspiracy. It is a measurable academic reality. Now, if the internet is flooded with synthetic data, future AI models are going to get sick from training on their own exhaust. The technical term for that is model collapse. Think of it like taking a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. Over several generations, the sharp edges of human knowledge blur into this meaningless gray noise. If you train an AI on data generated by an AI, the model's outputs degrade. The collapse of human-generated information is a genuine threat to future AI development. And that risk of model collapse is really just one symptom of the overarching crisis. As AI takes over our science, our code, our commerce, and our internet, our government structures are completely failing to keep up. We are facing a massive accountability crisis, and the governance failures are happening in real time. We see it first in geopolitics. China recently forced Meta to unwind its $2 billion acquisition of an AI startup called Manus. What's notable there is they ordered this reversal after the deal had already closed and the staff had been integrated. Citing national security concerns, nations are viewing AI not as consumer tech, but as critical national security infrastructure. But then you have nations struggling just to use the tech safely at a basic level. South Africa had to completely withdraw its draft national AI policy because officials discovered the draft was filled with fake AI-generated citations. Hallucinations are no longer just an annoying bug when you ask a chatbot for a recipe. They are state-level operational risks. A literal national policy was poisoned by fake data. Which brings us to the ultimate test of accountability right now. OpenAI itself. Let's look at the deep contradiction happening inside that company. CEO Sam Altman just published 5 guiding principles, including resilience, democratization, empowerment, and universal prosperity. He is publicly promising that OpenAI will be accountable to the public whose lives this technology is reshaping. And to their credit, they recently published a rigorous preparedness framework, which formally tracks when models become capable enough to pose biological, chemical, or cybersecurity risks. So on paper, it looks incredibly responsible. But there are 3 major tests that show a very different reality behind closed doors. Test number 1 is that preparedness framework itself. Test number 2 is their internal culture. A recent investigation exposed 70 pages of Slack messages from their former chief scientist, Ilya Sutskever. Those messages alleged that Altman actually misled the board on internal safety protocols. And we have to look at the dissolution of OpenAI's super alignment team. The super alignment team was basically their internal SEAL Team 6 for existential safety. Their sole job was making sure a super intelligent AI doesn't go rogue. They were promised 20% of the company's computing power to do this, and they were dissolved before completing their mission. When reporters asked an OpenAI spokesperson about employees working on existential safety, the spokesperson claimed he wasn't even familiar with the term. How do you claim to be building safe infrastructure when your PR team doesn't know the terminology your own safety team used? That brings us to the most sobering test. Test number 3, real-world harm. In Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, a mass shooter carried out an attack. Months before the attack, the shooter's conversations with ChatGPT were actually flagged internally by OpenAI's systems. They even banned his account. But no one at OpenAI alerted law enforcement. OpenAI issued a formal apology acknowledging the failure, but it happened right before he posted his new principles about working with governments to prevent harm. This raises an incredibly important question. What happens in the gap between a company's PR documents and its internal operational culture? When harm is actually detected, does the accountability stay hidden inside the building, or does it extend to the public? Trustworthiness is emerging as the next major battleground in AI deployment, far beyond how much compute you have or how smart your model is. Because if governments and the public cannot trust the institutions building the AI, the technical capabilities simply won't matter. Before we get into the final takeaways, just a reminder that you can find more insights and daily updates just like this at inuku.com. Let's bring this all together. We have covered a massive distance today. We're watching tech hyperscalers literally beam solar power from space just to bypass the terrestrial grid and feed their massive data centers. AI is actively transitioning from chatbots to autonomous agents. We have models like Spud doing the work of entire 100-person enterprise teams and bots negotiating their own financial deals. We're seeing the physical manifestations of this, from AI smartphones to the tiny island of Anguilla getting rich off domain names, while the digital internet collapses under the weight of synthetic AI-generated content. And finally, we are confronting the very real dangers of AI hallucinations, writing national policies, and tech giants struggling to align their lofty safety principles with their internal actions and real-world accountability. Unprecedented capabilities are operating in a total legal vacuum. To you listening right now, you are living through the exact moment the internet transitions from being a library of human thought into an automated bot economy. The foundational rewire is happening today. And as we navigate this rewire, we have to constantly ask, who is accountable when the system fails? I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We talked about ASI Evolve, that system that runs millions of simulations to design AI architecture better than human engineers can. And we talked about bots negotiating contracts at speeds and volumes humans can't possibly oversee. If the machines are building the machines and the bots are trading with the bots, at what point does the human economy become just a legacy API? Like an old, outdated piece of software that the machine economy only occasionally plugs into when it needs something from us. We aren't just bringing a shiny new appliance into the house. The entire house is being torn down and rebuilt around us by invisible hands. The question now is whether we still hold the deed to the property. And that's your daily dose of AI know-how from Inuku.com, AI news you can use.